My name is Celeste Hargrove. I am 34 years old. On a Saturday morning in early February, I stood in my kitchen in a bathrobe with a mug of cold coffee and watched a 43-second video clip on a loop for the third time. The clip was from our home security camera, the one Derek had installed himself 2 years earlier after our neighbor's garage got broken into. He was very proud of that camera. He had spent an entire Saturday afternoon mounting each unit, testing the night vision, adjusting the angles on the driveway feed until the coverage was exactly what he wanted. He even named the household Wi-Fi network something he found clever: Secure Nest Hargrove. He was a man who loved the feeling of being in control of a system. He was very skilled at framing control as a form of love. What Derek never once considered was that when he synced all 4 cameras to the household app, he had added my phone to the account. Just once, months earlier, so I could monitor a furniture delivery while I was at a client site across town. He added me without thinking about it. He forgot he had done it, and so for 18 months, every motion-triggered clip from every camera at our home had been archiving quietly to my phone as well as his, the driveway, the back porch, the side entrance. All of it, arriving on my screen like correspondence from a house that had quietly stopped keeping his secrets. The alert came through at 5:47 in the morning on the day he left for his so-called guy's trip. I opened it in bed, still half asleep, expecting the footage to be a raccoon at the trash bins. I watched it once and I was immediately and completely awake. I saw Derek loading luggage into the trunk of a black Uber. His own duffel. The navy, beat-up one with the broken zipper he had owned since college and refused to replace because he said it still worked fine, went in last. But before that, before his own bag, he carried out a cream-colored Louis Vuitton carry-on with a monogrammed luggage tag, a V and a stitched in gold thread. The tag read, V. Cole. Vanessa Cole, my best friend of 11 years. I didn't cry. I didn't drop my phone. I didn't call him. I set my phone face down on the nightstand, placed both feet flat on the floor, and took one breath that was slow enough to be a decision. Then I made 3 choices that would take me 8 months to execute and change the entire course of my life. This is that story. To understand what that 43-second clip truly meant, you have to understand the 10 years that came before it. My name before I was Celeste Hargrove was Celeste Okafor. I was born and raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the middle daughter of a Nigerian-American family that believed in education the way some families believe in God, with a devotion that was both its great gift and its occasional intensity. My father, Dr. Emmanuel Okafor, was an economics professor at Southern University, a man of precise language and enormous intellectual patience, who could make the failure of the Bretton Woods system feel as vivid and personal as the news that week. He was the kind of teacher who changed the architecture of how people thought. He did it in classrooms and he did it at our kitchen table. My mother, Grace Okafor, taught 3rd grade at a public school and spent her evenings tutoring neighborhood children whose families could not afford what she gave them freely and without complaint. I grew up watching my parents give everything they had and keep very little for themselves, and I came to understand early that the inheritance they were leaving me had nothing to do with money. It was character. It was the specific, quiet understanding that who you are when no one is watching is the only version of you that actually matters. I have 2 sisters. Adize, 4 years older, followed my father into academia, and now holds a PhD in public policy from Johns Hopkins, working in Washington, D.C., advising on federal housing initiatives with the same ferocious, organized precision my father brought to everything he valued. Chiamaka, 4 years younger, is a pediatric nurse in Houston. The warmest of the 3 of us by far, the one who calls our mother every single morning before her shift, without exception, for as long as I can remember. And then there is me, Celeste, the middle one, who went into interior design, not the kind that produces rooms for real estate photography, but the kind that requires sitting with a family for hours before ever picking up a pencil, understanding how they actually move through a space, what they need a room to feel like at 7 in the morning when the kids are loud, versus 9 at night when the house settles into itself. Over 7 years building my practice in Austin, I had made a name that was small but genuine, the kind that grows entirely through referral, because clients feel something real when they walk into the room that was built specifically for how they actually live. Derek Hargrove. I want to describe him with honesty, because the story does not require me to make him a cartoon villain. He was tall, composed, well-dressed in the specific way of a man who has always understood that appearance is the first signal people register and respond to. He worked in commercial finance, a director-level role at a regional bank that came with a solid salary, a corporate expense account, and a social universe built around business dinners, golf weekends, and the particular pleasure of narrating both to whoever would listen. When we met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner in the spring of 2015, he was charming in the precise way that only reads correctly in retrospect. He listened. He retained details. He asked follow-up questions weeks after the original conversation. He sent messages that referenced things you had said once in passing, as though your specific words had stayed with him. He made me feel in that specific and sustaining way of a person who knows exactly what they are doing, like I was the most genuinely interesting person he had ever chosen to spend time with. That feeling is not a small thing. That feeling is how it begins. We dated for 2 years. He proposed in October 2017 on a rooftop in downtown Austin, a setting he had researched and reserved with the thoroughness of a man who understands that the performance of a gesture matters as much as the gesture itself. My mother cried at the table when he called to ask my father's blessing first, a detail she mentioned to every person she knew for the next 3 months. My father shook his hand at our first dinner together afterward and said, with the quiet, measured gravity of a man who does not say things he does not mean, "Take care of my daughter." We were married in June of 2018 at a small venue at the edge of the hill country. 83 guests, yellow wildflowers, the smell of my mother's jollof rice at the rehearsal dinner, a tent strung with warm lights that swayed in the evening breeze. The first 2 years of our marriage were genuinely good. I need to say that specifically because honesty is the only reason this story has any value. We had a real rhythm. We bought a 4-bedroom colonial in Northwest Austin, mature oak trees in the yard, a back porch that was deep enough for a full table, a kitchen with east-facing windows that caught the morning light at the angle I had always imagined a kitchen should have. Derek managed our finances from early in our relationship, and I had allowed this to harden into an established dynamic because it matched his nature and freed mine. He liked spreadsheets, projections, the satisfaction of knowing where every dollar was and where it was going. He presented financial management as care, "Erkat, let me handle that, babe," and I received it as care because I was building my practice and trusted him completely, and because, I now understand, I had confused competence with character in the way that happens when you love someone and are not yet in possession of the relevant information. That trust, complete, specific, unexamined, turned out to be the most expensive thing I have ever given anyone. Derek's management of our shared life operated through a system of selective disclosure that I can now name precisely, though I could not name it then. He controlled what I knew by controlling what I was shown. Our financial apps were configured to display a summarized view, enough to feel informed, not enough to audit. He positioned himself as the expert and positioned my questions as obstacles to efficiency. And because I was building a practice and managing clients and designing rooms for other people's lives with my full attention, I was, for too long, a willing participant and not looking too closely at our own. There was a specific evening in the fall of 2021 that I returned to now with a different understanding. I had noticed a small discrepancy, a charge for car rental insurance on a weekend Derek had driven his own vehicle. I mentioned it at dinner. He laughed. "You must be looking at an old statement," he said. He moved the conversation on within 30 seconds to something about a colleague's promotion, and I let it go because he was so immediate and so confident, and because, by then, challenging him had accumulated a specific social cost I had learned to avoid. Pointed questions made the room heavier, so I asked fewer of them. That is how it works. Not through fear, through friction. through the steady, cumulative exhaustion of being made to feel that curiosity about your own finances is a form of distrust in your marriage. There were moments before December 2022 that I now understand were signals. I have thought about them carefully since then, not to punish myself for missing them, but to understand the architecture of how this kind of thing is built. Slowly, plausibly, with enough spacing between each event that no single one breaks through the surface of ordinary trust. The first signal was in the spring of 2021, when Derek offered to manage the renovation escrow account we had set up for the kitchen remodel. He presented it as efficiency, one person handling the draws, fewer complications. The contractor overran by $11,000, and Derek showed me a revised spreadsheet that made the math work in a way I accepted without asking to see the underlying receipts. The second was in July 2022, when a significant withdrawal appeared in our savings, $2,800, and Derek explained it as a transfer to an investment account he was trying for better yield. He said he would forward the account documentation. He never did. When I brought it up a week later, he sighed with the patient exhaustion of a man who treats being questioned by his wife as a form of ingratitude, and I let it go. The third was a credit card statement in September showing a jewelry purchase for $680 on a Tuesday afternoon. No occasion I could identify, no anniversary approaching, no birthday nearby. When I asked, he said it was a retirement gift for his administrative assistant. I believed him. I had no context to do otherwise. That is the specific trap of this kind of behavior. Each instance, examined in isolation, is perfectly explainable. The pattern only becomes visible when you finally look at all of them together. Vanessa Cole had come into my life 2 years before Derek did. We met in 2013 at a professional design workshop in Dallas. She was a freelance graphic designer. I was finishing my certification, and we were seated next to each other at a working lunch and discovered within 40 minutes that we shared the same particular humor, the same low tolerance for performative networking, and the same way of going quiet and attentive when something had our genuine interest rather than our social performance. We became close quickly and stayed that way for 11 years, in the specific, layered way that real long friendships develop, through accumulated honesty, accumulated history, accumulated shorthand that makes even the most difficult thing easier to say. She planned my bachelorette party with the kind of detail that tells you someone has been paying genuine attention to your preferences for years. She was a bridesmaid at my wedding. She was in the waiting room when my mother's hip surgery ran 2 hours over schedule, and we just stayed on the phone together, breathing until the surgeon walked out. She was the first person I called when I signed my first commercial design contract, and the person whose number I reached for whenever something good or terrible happened that I needed to say out loud. I trusted Vanessa Cole with everything I had ever been afraid to say. That is not a figure of speech. That is the exact nature of what our friendship was. Derek and Vanessa had always gotten along in the easy, uncomplicated way of two people who share a mutual person they love. Or so I believed. Looking back now with better information, there were signals I encountered and filed away without examining. A joke between them whose origin I didn't know. A shared reference at a dinner party I wasn't part of. A casual comment from Vanessa one evening that she and Derek had run into each other at a coffee shop near her apartment, a neighborhood neither of them had professional reason to frequent. A New Year's Eve photograph from that January where I am laughing at someone to my left, and Derek and Vanessa are standing next to each other, and the angle of their bodies, the specific tilt of the space between them, tells a small, quiet story I was not yet reading with the right eyes. I filed it. I moved on. That is the thing about patterns we have decided, beneath conscious thought, not to see. The money began disappearing in October 2022. Not overnight. Not dramatically. The way a ceiling leak works, imperceptible until the surface gives. Our savings had been steady above $31,000 through the summer. October's statement showed $24,000. When I asked Derek about it over dinner, he had a ready answer. A certificate of deposit for better yield. He would send me the documentation. He was calm and specific and entirely plausible. I asked a second time a week later. He sighed with the particular exhaustion of a man who experiences being questioned by his wife as a form of ingratitude. Celeste, I literally just explained this. I'm trying to help us grow. I let it go. That is what years of this dynamic had trained me to do. By the first week of December 2022, our joint checking account showed a balance of $412, 3 days before Christmas, with 2 mortgage payments due before the new year. The night I understood what was actually happening was December 14th, 2022, a Thursday. I had been at a client's home in Round Rock reviewing tile samples and grout finishes until close to 9:15 in the evening, and I came home to find Derek at the kitchen island on his laptop. When I walked through the door, he closed it, not with speed, not with panic, but with the specific unhurried calm of a person who has performed this gesture enough times that it no longer registers to him as anything. He looked up and said, "Hey, there's leftover pasta on the stove." I ate the pasta. We watched television. He kissed me goodnight and went to sleep. I lay beside him in the dark and listened to his breathing even out into the deep, untroubled rhythm of a man with a clear conscience, and then I picked up my phone and opened the bank app. The balance, $412. The 60-day transaction history, wire transfers in amounts of $3,000, $1,800, and $2,200, each labeled only by a destination account number. No merchant name, no description attached to any of them. A recurring Venmo payment of $1,200 per month sent to an account handle I did not recognize. A hotel charge from San Antonio, $460, 2 nights, on a specific weekend when Derek had told me he was in Dallas for a work conference. I did not wake him. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, and I breathed through what I was feeling with the deliberateness of a person who understands that the moment she loses her composure is the moment she loses. The advantage of knowing what she knows. I breathed until the feeling became something I could carry, rather than something that was carrying me. By morning, I had made 3 decisions. First, I was going to stop being a passive participant in my own financial life. Second, I was not going to say one word to Derek until I had complete, documented, unassailable information. Third, I was going to call my sister a Daisy in Washington and ask her for a referral to the best family law attorney in Austin. The kind who does not leave loose ends and extends no benefit of the doubt where the evidence does not support it. Derek came downstairs at 7 in the morning, poured coffee, asked if I had seen his dry cleaning receipt. I said I hadn't. I handed him a mug. I smiled at exactly the right moment. And inside, I had already begun to leave. Christmas arrived and I held it together with both hands. My parents flew in from Baton Rouge for 5 days. My mother filled the house with the smell of pepper soup and coconut rice, and her specific warmth, the kind that makes every room feel more inhabited. My father sat with Derek on the back porch and talked about interest rates and football. I watched my husband charm my father, and I smiled when I was supposed to smile and laughed when I was supposed to laugh, and nobody saw anything in my face because there was genuinely nothing to see from the outside. I had placed the storm somewhere interior and inaccessible. Vanessa texted on December 26th. She was with her family in Charlotte, she said. She sent a photograph of her nieces in matching Christmas pajamas holding candy canes. I sent back a heart. I said nothing about what I was beginning to understand. Even when I was ready to name it, Vanessa would be the last person I told. I also want to tell you about New Year's Eve of 2022, because it is the moment I think of most often when I try to describe what those first weeks were like internally. We attended a party at a neighbor's house, about 30 people, champagne at midnight, the ordinary warmth of a neighborhood gathering at the end of a year. Derek was charming in the room, as he always was, moving easily from one conversation to the next. Vanessa was there. She had come alone, and she spent most of the evening near the kitchen talking to a group I did not know well. Derek and I kissed at midnight. He held my hand on the walk home and told me he was looking forward to the new year. I said I was too. I meant it, though not in the way he understood. I was looking forward to the new year because I had already decided what I was going to do with it. That was the last month I was innocent about any of it. In the second week of January 2023, I drove alone to meet Patricia Afalabi on a Tuesday afternoon while Derek was at work. Patricia practiced family law in Austin and had a reputation, from people who had actually used her, for being methodical and absolutely unsparing. I sat across her desk and said, "I don't know the full extent of what's happening yet, but I need to understand my options before I say one word to my husband." She looked at me with the careful attention of someone whose work depends on reading people accurately. Then she nodded and said, "Smart. Let's start with what you know." She pulled out a legal pad. I told her everything, in order, without dramatizing, without collapsing. Just the facts as I had observed them. That meeting was the first time I cried about any of it, in private, in the bathroom. Once, when I was done, I put the tissue in the bin, straightened my spine, and walked back in. I picked up a pen. We had work to begin. Let me take you through the next 8 months exactly as they happened, because the details are the whole story. First week of January. I opened a personal bank account at a different institution. I deposited $4,600 from a client invoice I had been holding. I also adjusted my direct deposit split from 80% going to our joint account down to 60%, redirecting the rest to the new personal account. Derek did not notice because Derek looked at the joint balance, which I maintained at a level that would not trigger alarm. I tracked both accounts carefully on a spreadsheet on my personal laptop with a login he did not know. Second week, I hired Marcus Sosi, a private investigator recommended by Patricia from her active caseload. I gave him Derek's license plate, his regular schedule, and the name Vanessa Cole with her home address and studio location. I paid Marcus $2,200 for the first month in cash, from an envelope in the locked drawer of my home studio desk, a drawer I had fitted with its own small lock one Wednesday afternoon while Derek was at lunch. Using a hardware kit I had paid for in cash and told nobody about, by the end of January, Marcus had confirmed what I had been refusing to fully name. A photograph from January 22nd at 9:50 in the evening. Derek's car in the parking structure of Vanessa's building. 2 hours and 11 minutes between arrival and departure. Marcus documented 7 similar instances over the following 3 weeks. I uploaded everything to a secured cloud folder with a password only I knew. I printed nothing. I went about my days. February. Derek announced at Sunday dinner, roast chicken, green beans, the expensive olive oil from Bernie Road he liked, that he and some colleagues were taking a trip to Las Vegas. 4 nights. He was animated and pleased in the theatrical way he got when something was going to plan. "You don't mind, right?" I said, "Of course not." I asked which hotel. He said the Aria. I wrote it on the kitchen notepad I kept for grocery lists so it would look unremarkable. Marcus confirmed the win. 1 king bedroom. Derek's corporate card. Check-in February 9th. Check-out February 12th, 3 nights, not 4. He had never been to Las Vegas. Not on this trip, and not on a prior one in October that Marcus subsequently confirmed had been otherwise occupied as well. Vanessa texted me during those 3 days. "Home with a work deadline," she said. She sent a photograph of her feet in fuzzy socks, with a novel in her lap. The specific book we had discussed in November. The one she had told me she had just finished. She had sent a recycled photograph as a weekend alibi. I noted it. I sent a laughing emoji. I said it looked cozy. Meanwhile, in the only reality I was actually living in, I had a business. 18 months before any of this came to resolution, I had restructured part of my design practice into a separate LLC, Hargrove Studio Interiors, registered solely in my name. When Derek had glanced at the paperwork once and asked about it, I explained it as a liability separation measure for tax purposes. True, complete. Boring enough that he moved on in under 2 minutes. He was never interested in the operational mechanics of my work. He was interested in what it contributed to our joint account. What he did not know, by February 2023, the LLC had 14 active clients, 3 of them commercial. A restaurant group in East Austin, a boutique hotel expansion in San Marcos, a co-working development in South Austin, It had generated $118,000 in revenue over the previous 12 months. None of that money had ever touched an account Derek could see. All of it was properly taxed, documented, and sitting in an account whose existence he had no reason to suspect. I built it in silence. While he was draining the account I trusted him with, I was building a floor under my own feet that he knew nothing about. March. Patricia assembled the complete financial picture through formal discovery. $61,000 in unauthorized outgoing transfers over 14 months, each one documented, 2 primary recipients, a private brokerage account in Derek's name alone, and a series of payments Marcus confirmed were associated directly with Vanessa, a vacation rental in Sedona in September 2022, 2 jewelry purchases downtown, and a private dinner whose itemized bill totaled $2,140. At the same restaurant Derek had taken me to for our 3rd anniversary. I sat with Patricia and looked at the 72 rows on her spreadsheet. 14 months of my marriage reconstructed in clean, exact columns. "How do you want to proceed?" she asked. "Thoroughly," I said. April through June. My work continued at full pace. A Westlake Hills referral brought me a 4,000 square foot renovation in Terrytown, $62,000 in design fees. I said yes to everything that year. I kept my voice exactly where it needed to be on the weekly calls with Vanessa. In May, Marcus confirmed that Vanessa had given Derek a key to her apartment. Documented entering alone on 4 separate occasions, twice arriving with grocery bags. He was cooking for her, in her kitchen, while I was at client presentations across the city. I sat with that information and let it settle into the picture I had been assembling for months. July. I signed the lease on a 1-bedroom in Bolden Creek. I paid the deposit from my personal account. I furnished it over 3 consecutive weekends, choosing every object for a space that would feel completely and only like me. One of the stranger qualities of those 8 months was the texture of the domestic surface I had to maintain simultaneously. While Marcus was building a documented record of Derek's movements, and Patricia was assembling the financial disclosure package, I was also making dinner and asking about Derek's work week and sitting beside him on the couch on Tuesday evenings watching whatever he had selected. The normalcy was not exactly performance. It was more like existing in 2 places at once. The Celeste who handed Derek his coffee in the morning, and the Celeste who maintained the locked drawer and the cloud folder and the Bolden Creek lease were the same person, in the same body, moving through the same kitchen. I say this because I think anyone who has ever had to maintain composure under sustained invisible pressure knows exactly the texture of that particular doubled existence. You learn to be fully present in the surface life, while the interior life continues its necessary quiet work. The month of July was in some ways the most demanding of the 8. Not because anything went wrong. Nothing went wrong. But because by July everything was ready. Patricia was prepared. The apartment was furnished. The camera footage was secured. The LLC statements were organized. I had been living with complete knowledge of what I was going to do and exactly when I was going to do it for long enough that the waiting had become its own specific wait. There is an endurance required in the final stretch of a plan that is harder, in some ways, than the early adrenaline of the beginning. At the beginning, you are moving on decision and urgency. By July, I was moving on something quieter, the measured, deliberate energy of a woman who is committed completely and is simply waiting for the right moment to arrive. August. I joined the planning committee for our HOA's annual charity gala at the Barton Creek Country Club, volunteered to design the room, and mentioned to the coordinator Lydia Brennan that I would be sharing a brief professional announcement at the event. I also suggested Vanessa Cole receive an invitation, framing it as a renewed social connection. Lydia assented. Vanessa accepted. Preparation, done well, is its own form of precision. If you are still watching right now, and if any part of this story feels like something you are living or have already lived, I want you to pause and drop a comment below. Tell me where in the world you are. Tell me what word this story brings up for you. It genuinely matters to know that these stories reach real people in real places, because that is the entire reason Revenge Chronicles exists. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. We publish a new story every single day, and every woman on this channel had a moment exactly like this one. Not one of them chose to collapse. Now let me tell you what happened on the 14th of September. The Barton Creek Country Club sits on a hill above the Austin skyline, and on the evening of September 14, 2023, it held 212 guests, neighbors, bank colleagues, committee members, spouses, and two people who had spent 8 months believing they were managing a situation they had already completely lost. I arrived at 6:30 in the evening to oversee the room setup. Ivory linens, low candlelight. The view through the floor-to-ceiling windows doing exactly what I had designed it to do. Lydia found me at 6:45 and said the room looked extraordinary. I thanked her and made one final check of the AV system, specifically the slideshow I had loaded that afternoon, which Lydia believed contained client project photography. Derek arrived at 7:15 in a charcoal blazer. He found me near the entrance, put his hand on my lower back, and said the room was beautiful. He had a drink in his free hand and the easy, expensive posture of a man who has no idea the axis of his life has already begun to tilt. I straightened his collar. I said, "Let's have a good night." Vanessa arrived at 7:40 in a green silk dress I had never seen. She came straight to me and embraced me and said the room was incredible, that I had outdone myself. I held her hands for a moment after the embrace. I looked at her face. 11 years in that face. Every expression I knew better than my own. And I said calmly, "I'm so glad you came. I have something to say tonight and I want you to be here for it." She tilted her head. "What for?" I smiled. "Just a professional announcement, nothing dramatic." She laughed. "You are always so composed." "Yes, I am." Dinner ran until 9 in the evening. The program began at 9:15. Opening remarks, the charity presentation, a live auction, and then, at 9:45, Lydia stepped to the podium and said, "We have one final item on tonight's program. I'd like to invite Celeste Hargrove to the stage." I set down my glass. I walked to the stage in my burgundy gown and stood behind the microphone and let the silence fill the room for exactly 3 seconds. "Good evening," I said. "For those who know me primarily as Derek's wife, and I know that is how many of you think of me, I want to offer a small correction tonight. My name is Celeste Okafor Hargrove. I am the founder and principal designer of Hargrove Studio Interiors." From my peripheral vision, I saw Derek set his drink down at his table. I did not look at him directly. Over the past 18 months, my firm has completed 26 residential projects and 3 commercial installations here in Austin. This year, the LLC crossed a milestone I'm proud to share, $203,000 in annual revenue. The company is profitable, it is growing, and it has been built entirely in the space of designing rooms that feel like the truest version of people's real lives. Genuine applause. Several clients of mine were on their feet. People who had only ever known me as Derek's wife were visibly recalculating something. Tonight I'm also announcing that I've joined the advisory board of a women's entrepreneurship initiative here in Austin, an organization that supports women who are building things in silence, often under circumstances that are more complicated than they appear from the outside. I paused. I understand those circumstances personally. More applause. I nodded toward the screen behind me. The first 3 slides were client photography. Beautiful rooms, clean work. The 4th slide was a certified copy of our joint bank statement, Derek Hargrove's name on the account holder line, showing $61,000 in unauthorized outgoing transfers over 14 months. Every line item highlighted in red. The 5th slide was Patricia's formal accounting of dissipated marital assets. From somewhere in the crowd, Derek said, "What?" and then silence. The 6th slide was the still image from our home security camera, 5:47 in the morning, February 9, 2023. Derek at the trunk of a black Uber. and in his two hands, clearly and unmistakably, the cream-colored Louis Vuitton carry-on. The monogram tag readable at full projection, V. Cole. The room went silent in the way that only happens when 200 people simultaneously understand what they are looking at. I did not look at Vanessa. I did not need to. What happened in the room in the 4 seconds after the 6th slide appeared was total silence, not the polite kind. The specific kind that occurs when 200 people are simultaneously reconstructing a story they thought they already knew. Then I heard a woman near the back of the room say, in a voice that carried because the room was so quiet, "Oh my God." And then the murmuring spread, low and continuous. The sound of a room processing information that has reorganized everything it thought it understood about the evening it was attending. A woman from our street, who I had always found guarded and formal, caught my eye as I stepped back from the microphone. She gave me a single nod, slow and specific, the kind that communicates something that doesn't require words. 2 of my clients found me before I reached the exit. One simply took my hand and held it for a moment. The other said quietly, "I didn't know any of this." I said, I know you didn't." And I kept walking. "I want to be transparent tonight," I said, "because I have spent too much of my life being managed by people who assumed I wasn't paying attention. I was always paying attention. I was simply choosing my moment." I let that sit for 3 seconds. I will not be returning to the address on file in this HOA directory. As of last week, I have relocated to an apartment in Central Austin. My attorney will be in contact with the appropriate parties. And to every woman in this room who has ever been the quiet one, the one holding everything together while someone else took credit, or took more than credit, I see you. This is what it looks like when you stop being small. I stepped back. I nodded once to Lydia, who was standing at the edge of the stage, with an expression I have thought about since, equal parts astonishment and something that looked very much like respect. I walked off the stage, collected my clutch, opened my rideshare app, and walked out of the Barton Creek Country Club into the warm September night without looking back once at Derek Hargrove or at Vanessa Cole. The applause that followed was not the polished, obligatory kind. It was the kind that comes when a room full of people collectively exhale something they have been holding without knowing its name. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I had said what needed to be said, in front of the people who needed to hear it. At exactly the moment I had chosen. The texts began 4 minutes after I left the building. Derek sent 11 messages in the first 30 minutes. Confusion, then justification, then something reaching toward remorse. The first, "Celeste, what the hell was that?" The 5th, "You could have just talked to me." The 8th, "I made mistakes, I know that. Please." The 11th, "I'm coming home." I responded once, "There is no home for you to come to. Your attorney will hear from mine." He called 17 times that night. I answered none of them. I was already at my apartment in Bolden Creek, the clean, quiet 1-bedroom I had leased 2 months earlier and furnished over 3 weekends with the specific pleasure of choosing every object for a space that belongs entirely to myself. I sat on my own couch in my own silence and ate the takeout I had ordered in advance because I had accounted for exactly this evening in every detail. Vanessa sent one message, just one. It said, "I am so sorry. I don't know how to explain this." I read it. I held the phone and I thought about 11 years, the bachelorette party she had organized with such precise attention to what I loved, the speech she had given at my rehearsal dinner, her voice on the phone the morning my mother went into surgery, when we just stayed on the line together, breathing until the surgeon came out, and then I thought about the luggage tag. V. Cole. Gold thread on cream leather. Carried through my front door at 5:47 in the morning by my husband. I deleted the message, not from anger. I want to be honest about that, because honesty is the only currency this channel deals in. I deleted it because there was nothing she could say that would reconfigure the geometry of what had happened, and responding would have given her access to something she had already forfeited. I chose the closed door. Some thresholds, once crossed, simply cannot be uncrossed. The divorce proceedings moved with the clean efficiency of 2 prepared attorneys and 1 very complete paper trail. Derek contested nothing of substance. The settlement was finalized in December 2023. The house sold in October for $648,000. My share of the full settlement was $319,000. I tell you the number because for years I had functioned as a secondary figure in a financial story I was supposedly an equal part of. The number matters as a fact, as evidence that what was mine, and that the records kept in a locked drawer were not paranoia, they were accuracy. The real loss, and I want to sit with this because it gets glossed over, was not Derek. I had been losing Derek slowly over years without fully knowing it, and perhaps the version of him I had married had always been somewhat theoretical. That kind of loss processes itself in fragments, privately, at 2 in the morning when the apartment is very quiet and you reach instinctively for the architecture of a life that no longer exists around you. You allow yourself that grief. You do not dismiss it because a legal settlement went in your favor. The real loss was Vanessa. That one lives in a structurally different part of the chest. 11 years is not an abstraction. It is the specific texture of someone's humor. The language you build together over enough shared time that you no longer need the full sentence to be understood. You lose all of it at once. You lose not just the person, but a version of your own daily life that had her woven all the way through it, and no amount of justified calm changes the particular weight of that. Not immediately. Not in the first weeks. Not yet. I did not reach out to her. I do not plan to. Not from bitterness. Bitterness would require spending energy I have chosen to redirect. I simply have nothing left to say to her that she does not already know. The friendship did not end the night Derek carried her suitcase out of my house. It ended somewhere in the years before that, when she chose to use my trust as operational cover for something that betrayed the entire foundation of what our friendship was built on. I grieve the loss of who I believed she was. I do not grieve the loss of who she actually turned out to be. Those are 2 different people, and only one of them ever truly existed. What I am left with is a version of myself I had to build under sustained pressure, without an audience, without validation, without anyone to confirm that what I was doing in those 8 months of silence was right. There were nights when the spreadsheet on Patricia's desk felt too clinical for the actual texture of what I was living through, when the silence I was maintaining started to feel less like strategy and more like simple exhaustion. On those nights, I would go into my studio and look at the floor plans and the project photographs and the LLC statements and the locked drawer, and something in me would settle, not because I was certain of the outcome, because I was certain I was being honest with myself, and that was the only solid thing available. That was the moment I stopped being Derek's wife and started becoming my own answer. I think about the woman who stood in that kitchen at 5:47 in the morning with cold coffee and a 43-second video clip. She did not fall. She did not call her husband and perform the grief he expected. She took a breath. She made 3 decisions, and she moved quietly and precisely in the direction of her own dignity, without a single dramatic gesture, without losing her composure once, without giving a single person a reason to see her coming. To any woman watching this who is somewhere in the middle of something she cannot yet fully name, who is keeping her face arranged correctly at dinner tables while something inside her has gone very, very still, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not weak. You are not foolish for having trusted. You are not behind. You are in the preparation phase. And preparation, done with precision, is its own form of power. The quietest women tend to build the longest runways. You do not need to perform your pain for anyone who has not earned the right to witness it. You do not need to explain yourself to people who chose not to ask the right questions when they still had the chance. You do not need to announce your plans to anyone who has not genuinely earned the right to know them. You just need to pay attention. Keep your records. Open the right account. Call the right attorney. Furnish the apartment before you need it. Build the thing no one is watching. And when the moment comes, and it always comes, for every single woman who does the work, let your actions say what months of silence have been promising all along. That is the entire philosophy of this channel, distilled into one woman's 8 months. There is a specific kind of woman this channel is built for. She is not dramatic. She does not seek attention. She does not announce her grievances or perform her pain or ask for anyone's permission to take herself seriously. She goes quiet when the situation calls for it, and she does the work and she waits, and she does not mistake endurance for weakness because she has never once believed they were the same thing. She is the woman who sat in the parking lot of a law office in January and cried once in a bathroom and then went back in and picked up a pen. She is the woman who furnished a new apartment on 3 quiet weekends and told no one. She's the woman who walked onto a stage in a burgundy gown in front of 212 people and spoke the truth in a voice so calm it made the room afraid of her in exactly the right way. If you are that woman, or if you are becoming her, I see you. This channel exists for you. The loudest comebacks are built in silence. That is not just a tagline. That is a philosophy that has been earned by every woman who ever made a decision in the dark and then watched it bloom in front of witnesses who never saw it coming. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever built something in silence, a plan, a boundary, a business, a new version of yourself, while the people around you had no idea it was taking shape? What kept you going quietly when everything in you wanted to speak? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one without exception. To every person watching right now, whether you found this at noon on a Sunday or at midnight when the room is too quiet, thank you. Genuinely and specifically, thank you. You are the reason Revenge Chronicles exists. This channel was built for the woman sitting exactly where you are sitting, in exactly the kind of moment you may be in, who needs to know that the long, quiet road leads somewhere real. If this story reached something in you, share it with one woman today who needs it. She will understand immediately why you sent it. Subscribe if you haven't. A new story goes up every single day, and every woman on this channel chose the runway over the explosion and arrived somewhere extraordinary. We will see you in the next one. The woman who left that gala was not the woman who had stood at the kitchen counter 8 months earlier. She was the same person, same values, same name, same work, but she was no longer carrying the weight of a story that was not true. There is a lightness to that. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but a clean, specific lightness that comes from having finally put down something you carried for much longer than you should have.